Evans' Gambit is one of the most exciting continuations for white in the Italian opening. Today I want to show you how Evans' Gambit created one of the most celebrated chess games ever, the Evergreen Game. It starts with the Italian game, also known as gioco piano, which means quiet game in Italian. If both sides play correctly, indeed it is a quiet game. The problem is the players of the era, this is the 19th century we are talking, didn't want quiet. They wanted gambits, sacrifices, fireworks. An unlikely candidate, a chess amateur, sea captain William Davies Evans finds the answer in 1824. While commanding a ship on a regular route between Wales and Irish Waterford, he studies positions, and what he comes up with is b4. A gambit. Because what does black do now? Every answer leads to white taking the initiative. If black retreats, white takes the initiative. If black decides to take, white plays c3 and takes the initiative again. This is perfect opening for the Romantic era chess. Gambit the pawn for the initiative. Exactly what the doctor ordered. Let's see now how Evans' Gambit led to one of the most celebrated games in chess history, the Evergreen Game. If you like this content, show it with a like. Black decides to accept the gambit and take the pawn on b4, and the expected c3 comes. Black withdraws the bishop, and now the principled d4 is played by white to open up the center. Black decides to take the pawn and is now 2 pawns up. But who is counting? This is the era of the attacking chess. Before the attack, white needs to do one more thing, and that's exactly what Anderssen does. Castle. Put his king to safety. You might wonder, how did this opening even spread from the Irish Sea through Europe? Around 1826, Evans is on shore leave in London. He sits down against Alexander MacDonald, one of the strongest players in the world. Evans plays his new idea and wins. MacDonald immediately begins using the gambit himself, and it spreads through Europe like fire. Every top player of the era takes it up. The Evans' Gambit is born. Black sees here where this is heading, and white will create a big pawn center on the next move, so black decides to push d6. White immediately starts to threaten on f7 and black queen defends. But white continues the attack with e5. Now black couldn't have taken, so they move their queen now to g6, and rook to e1 still does come. Finally, it seems like black has figured it out. They need to castle sometime soon, so they move to knight and they are ready to castle now. But white simply continues attacking towards the opponent's king. Now at this stage, black figured out that they need to do something and they need to give up their pawn advantage, maybe to regain a little bit of the initiative, so they push b5. And now, rightfully, white decides to take it with a queen. Queen comes back after the attack from the rook, and bishop now starts also from black to I towards the white king. Now white starts to include the remaining pieces into the game, with knight coming from b to d2, and now we see something in the true spirit of the Romantic era. Instead of castling for black king, they decide instead to start attacking also towards the white king with bishop to b7. But this might have been the last chance to castle. Subscribe to support me and see more chess opening stories coming up Tuesdays and Saturdays. White immediately continues attacking with knight to e4. Queen does something that I still don't understand, because after bishop takes on d6, queen is under a discovered attack very soon, so queen needs to go to one of the rare squares that are actually left. And now Anderssen does something really beautiful and sacrifices the knight in a fork. Black has to take, otherwise they would lose their queen, and now pawn comes to f6 and that knight is really pinned, but at a minimum it is an exchange sacrifice. That is one thing, but the other one is black now has a very serious attack. Look at that bishop now at b7, look at rook at g8, and look at the queen. Will white actually get checkmated here? But white completely ignores that threat and begins with the knight sacrifice, playing the other rook to d1. Engine recommended bishop to e4, playing it safe. So the queen says, fine, I'll take the knight. Thank you. What happens next? Another sacrifice, this time of an exchange, and here it would have been much better for black to simply move their king, but black decided to cover themselves with another knight. And let's see how did it end up with a beautiful queen sacrifice right now, because at this stage this is forced checkmate. So what happens now? King has to take, bishop comes with a check, and now king has literally two choices. If the king goes to c6, bishop delivers the final checkmate. King decided to go all the way back. Nice and beautiful, almost final check, and the checkmate by the other bishop. The first world champion Steinitz called this beautiful game Evergreen, and the name stuck. Sacrifice all you have for a successful attack. That's what chess players appreciate the most, and they did even back then. An elderly gentleman would tip his hat every time the Evans Gambit was played in London Chess Club. When asked about it, he said, "I am Captain Evans, and I want to return the compliment." He learned chess at 28 and still left a permanent mark with his gambit. It is even mentioned on his tombstone. Emanuel Lasker, the second world champion, was a party pooper here. He didn't refute the gambit fully, but found the right moment to return the pawn and make the game quiet again. Evans' Gambit is still occasionally played, even Kasparov used it successfully against Anand once. More stories behind chess, twice a week.